can you please tell the audience the story of Robert Redford hating you?
Oh yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I think this really speaks to my insecurities and like paranoia. And there's so much. I don't think I'm alone as an actor. I mean, I definitely think I'm in the mentally unhealthy side of the. Maybe I lean a little further in than most people, but there's a lot that you're susceptible to choosing acting as a career. There's so much uncertainty that it's like you really got to work hard to stay sane. But I booked a really fun acting job in The Discovery, a film with Jason Segel and Robert Redford and Jesse Plemons and oh god, I can't remember the other names. But that it was such a cool role to get because I was I was working with Robert Redford. I don't want to give away what happens exactly.
What? So
it's a spoiler.
Yeah, it's a spoiler, and I don't think you should. Anyone listening to this, go on, watch The Discovery. It's on Netflix. Brian's role. It's the very beginning. So throw it on, and Brian makes a giant splash. Go on.
I got sick before I shot that, and I've now really learned, clearly from my everything else I've talked about. I'm always paying attention to substances and what they do to me and everything, And I was taking, I think Sudafed. I think some sort of high-powered Sudafed to keep my freaking nose. Like I got a really bad cold, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna back out of this. But I'm working with Robert Redford, and I'm just convinced he hates me because of these like the subtle sort of facial expressions and all this stuff, and. I was playing a sound guy. I was miking Robert Redford, and this is actually really funny. This is why I wasn't convinced that he hated me for this reason, but in the very beginning, I'm standing between his legs. I'm kneeling between his legs, pinning a microphone on his lapel, and they yelled cut, and I just stood there for a while between Robert Redford's legs. And eventually he goes, "Son, I think you could probably stand back until they yell places again." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, sure, of course." But that was at the very beginning. And he was really nice, but he was getting, he had a lot to do. There's a lot of expected of him for this film. He was in his, I think, 70s. And I think he had a lot to be, he was always polite and courteous. But I just had this feeling that he was getting really, really frustrated with me. I didn't consider the fact that it was because he had to do like a million takes of this scene because his coverage was the most important. But as a fairly young actor, you get this like sort of narcissistic feeling that like you're so important and that everything that was going wrong was my fault. And I remember just being so deeply paranoid about it and sharing that with you. And then what is it, like a decade later, I finally have the awareness to be like, oh, I can suffer from some extreme paranoia at times.
He probably
on
wasn't.
Set, and I don't think it had anything to do with me. But I was convinced for like months. That
Robert Redford hated you.
Yeah, but I really do think that the Sudafed, like I was like borderline schizophrenic about it.
You also had to like do your take of this scene a lot of times,
right.
and people really need to watch it to understand why Brian would be in a. This is funnier when you see the scene. So please watch The Discovery, watch what Brian does at the beginning, and then picture him having to do this 100 times while thinking Robert Redford hates
me.
Yeah, it's a very.
It's just so funny. I always loved Robert Redford, and we filmed that in Newport, Rhode Island, which was where my dad grew up. So I would go there every summer.
Oh, no way.
And I knew all these spots, and so I had this fantasy. I'm like, man, I'm gonna hang out with Robert Redford, and we're gonna go out for lobster afterwards. Just like ridiculous fantasies.
Yes.
But it's also kind of crazy that a lot of crazy fantasies can come true with acting because Jason Segel, I'm a huge fan of his, and Ted
He's
Danson,
great, yeah.
huge fan of his. Mary Steenburgen, huge fan of hers. And I'm like, I was in the scene with her, and Jason. I had lunch with Jason Segel that day. I sat with him, talked, hung out with him, and
I remember something he told me. He said about writing.
yeah,
We
talked about writing, and he says, he was like, it always helps when you're writing for yourself. You know yourself. And Ted Danson was there just as like Mary Steenburgen's husband or boyfriend. And we like sat in the grass and just talked about life, looking at the ocean for like a long time. And I was like, what a day. What a day.
The joys of being an actor.
I was so new to it all. And I was like, what the heck is happening? But it was all partially ruined because Robert Redford.